Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here for our panel, Confronting Values and Measures in Project and Policies. So I'm Simona de Rosa from T6 Ecosystem. T6 is a research and innovation company based in Italy, and we are partner of the S+T+ARTS project, the support action running now until 2025. And in the project, we are running the evaluation of the residency that S+TARTS will host in the next month. And in a previous project, S+TARTS Prize, we have been the one creating a framework to assess the impact of the S+TARTS Prize. This is why I'm here to moderate this panel about measures and values, because it's some time now that we are also with ACTE and some representative of other institutions that are here, reflecting and comparing our ideas on the need to somehow try to map the impact of the science, art, and technology initiatives, even if it's a very complex issue, because you have to combine the needs to quantify the results with the need to let the artists be free, and also you keep in mind that not necessarily what the institutions like the European Commission or other there are funding the initiatives supporting art, science, and tech has in mind with the need of the artists to quantify their work. So it's a very complex issue. And today we have a very heterogeneous panel to discuss the point. And we have Michele Coletti, Associate Professor in the Department of Management, Technology and Strategy at the Grenoble École de Management. Teresa Sanchis, which is the Head of Strategy of the Institute for Bioengineering of Catalonia. And she's the responsible for the Art and Science program at the IBEC. Sofia Greaves is a postdoctoral researcher working for the Postgrowth Innovation Lab at the University of Vigo. Mona Hedayati, she's an artist and researcher, and she's a joint PhD candidate in the interdisciplinary humanities at the Concordia University at Antwerp Research Institute for the Arts. And Adrien Lucca. He's a visual artist, and since 2013, he has been professor at the National School of Visual Arts of La Camp, and since 2015, his main activity has been creating monumental artwork, often in glass. So now we are going to hear the presentation from the panelists, and the first round will be more to learn their perspective and how they are facing in their daily basis work the issue of the measurement and values. And after that, we will have a second round more specifically related of the issue on how to measure the impact of the initiative related to art, science, and tech. So without any delay, I would ask Michele to start the presentation. Thank you.
Everybody for being here, and to the organizers for having invited me, and Rosanna Di Nuzzo, that is my co-author. I come from management, so it will be extremely dry, mostly common sense. This morning I had a wonderful, I was looking at the beautiful presentations with the wonderful images. I have practically only text. So hopefully 8 minutes will go
Perfect.
fast. So I started from this, that I don't know whether I can make it work. Okay, the Draghi report is a new one, is the report that Ursula von der Leyen has commissioned to Mario Draghi to have a future, to have an outlook on the future of European competitiveness. 69 pages, I don't know if you spend some time to look at that. I checked for artists, 0. Then I checked for culture, 0. I checked for creativity, 0. Interesting. Science, 7 times. Technology, 137. Likely, innovation is 147. So maybe this innovation will be word, at least the concept will be instrumental to give continuity to your work, to your great work that you are doing here. So what is the rationale of our research? is that actually there is a recent paper that says, you know what, these transdisciplinary relations work to a certain extent. This morning there was Chris Salter explaining how difficult are in practice these kind of collaborations. But actually we don't know how they work. Okay. It's a sort of mayonnaise. Sometimes it's nice, sometimes a bit less. Okay. So I teach innovation, but I also co-manage a master in international project management. So I say, maybe we can learn something from art and science projects, or vice versa. We can teach something to art and science project managers. And then in that case, you have my visit card. Please send your children or yourself come to our school for taking this master. We are at the beginning of this research, even though it's several months that we are working on that, but you know, researchers have a sort of long-term cycles. And what we did a qualitative research. We interviewed 5 people so far. A couple of them are in this room. I'm very grateful to them for the time that they shared with us. I was able to take other 2-3 appointments today, so it's good also. The research will have a follow-up. We put also together 4 reports from various projects, but and I know that those of you that work in qualitative studies, maybe they will have a hard time to understand why I put together interviews and documents. But okay, we can discuss it later. The approach is abductive. So we are using a sort of theory of reference. It's not really a theory, it's an heuristic, but we'll discuss about that also later if you like. I'm using a framework, because what is a great project? Actually, no, even the standards are not very clear on that. So I'm using this framework from the International Project Management Association. It's called the Project Excellence Model. Basically, you see 3 dimensions: people and purpose, process and resources, and project results. So it's relatively simple. I will not go into the details of the framework. So basically, we're coding these documents and these interviews using this framework. What are the preliminary results? The preliminary results is that there are a number of art and science projects. So we have the science-driven, in which the idea is to move scientific knowledge to the public sphere. There are participatory and citizen science projects, in which the idea is to involve, the scope is to involve citizens in maybe creating awareness, or more rarely to understand their opinions regarding certain ideas. Challenge-driven projects that somewhat are referring to the grand challenges, especially in the environmental dimension. And again, you may know some of these projects. Technology-driven, in which there is the idea, this is a very old idea, maybe some of you remember constructive technological assessment. Over the decades, not even the years, there is a tendency to say, okay, we can steer the evolution, the development of certain technology in a way that is beneficial to society. I'm somewhat skeptical about that, but maybe it's the age, or maybe some of you still have the hope that this is possible to do. Then art-driven projects, in which when the idea is to improve the capabilities of the artist to deliver beautiful performances, and industry-driven projects that are those that are supposed to bring innovation that, as I said before, is central in the mandate of the second term of Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission. Okay? Of course, these are ideal types, so in the sense that most of the projects have several combinations, several dimensions combined. I will be a little bit faster because I see the time is going fast here. So basically what you have that a range, a spectrum of possible objectives that go from citizen awareness to art and culture to scientific creativity, and then to business innovation, okay? Now, one of the points that I discussed with several colleagues is, how do you measure the output and the impact of a project like this? But I think that having this clear definition helps a little bit. So I think that it could be useful to introduce the concept of additionalities that in many European-funded projects is quite frequent, and you may have input additionalities, output. I will not go because the time is going fast. Input, output, and behavioral additionalities for what concerns the economic impact, but also economic empowerment of artists, especially, that sometimes they survive from call to call. Hopefully, it's not the case for those that are present today. But then you have also social additionalities. So you have social capital, you have awareness of citizens, you may have educational outcomes, you have the cultural enrichment, and also the policy influence. No? Maybe some of the projects, art and science, have also the objective to influence the policy maker debate. I think it's useful to see this cycle of project management in art and science. You will see that this is a traditional cycle, so I will not go through all the elements, but you see that the challenge and the format are very important. So the very last slide, so I have, because I have a few seconds left, is we listed there what we have seen so far that are the success factors in art and science projects. And you see where PM is written is very much related to the project manager or to the project management team. So we really think that there is a purpose in having management and business studies combining, supporting, if you like, art and science projects, because there are practices that maybe could be transferred from a field to the other and vice versa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michele.
Thank you.
That's very interesting. And before we go to Teresa, I would like to ask you, you mentioned the success factors now in the last slide. And the project management has the tool to go through it. Can you spend some minutes about the challenges instead that you have, if you have also tracked in your study? I mean, these are the success stories, which are?
I myself, huh? Yeah, you want?
Yes.
Okay. No, because maybe there was someone better prepared to answer.
I mean, if you have success factors, you have the challenges.
The challenges are somewhat specular to the factor. What we have seen is that sometime, maybe I'm wrong, I'm saying something that is a minefield. So, but you can throw tomatoes or some leftover from the lunch if you like, if you don't like what I'm saying. But sometimes when you have funded projects, you tend to expand very much the goals. So you are sure that, okay, I'm not going to reach all the objectives, but some of the objectives I will get there, I will be able to reach. And this creates a lot of fuzziness regarding what you are trying to achieve. And maybe it will be better to be a little bit more, how to say, precise in what are your goals. Because this will allow the project to be a little bit more convergent. Of course, if you do this, you make easier to spot when you fail. I think that one of the issues that in business is very clear is that we say, you know what, if you are successful 10% of the time in putting a product on the market, it's good. It's a good rate. I don't see here that 90% of the projects fail. How come that almost no project fail? So I wonder whether people have the courage to say, okay, there is an output, but it was not up to expectation. Can we put this on the table, or better not, because we don't want to break this nice picture?
Thank you very much. I think we can come back to it at the end of the panel with other questions. Teresa, now we are passing from a research to a real experience, because Teresa is working at the IBEC and she's leading the art science incubation project. So Teresa, please let us know more about your experience in building up such a framework in your institution.
Okay. Thank you, Simona, and thank you, everybody. I'm very happy to be here today to explain to you the Art and Bioengineering program of the Institute for Bioengineering of Catalonia, IBEC. Sorry.
The road down?
No, see, down, sorry. Well, to provide some context, I would like to start by briefly introducing IBEC. The Institute for Bioengineering and our motivation to start our art and bioengineering program. IBEC is a research center located here in Barcelona. We want to work to develop technologies for health, putting together different fields like nanomedicine, tissue engineering, smart data analysis, artificial intelligence, or advanced microscopy. And to do this, we embrace the concept of transdiscipline, of convergence. No, we aim to facilitate transdisciplinary integration of life science, physical sciences, engineering, and beyond for the benefit of society. As you can see here, recent breakthroughs in bioengineering are allowing us to create novel living entities like artificial hearts or brain organoids or self-propelled nanorobots. And also we are able to, thanks to bioengineering, to develop technologies to study and control human body. For instance, with brain digital twins, with molecules to control brain states, or CRISPR to modify our DNA. And this are opening up new questions about human conditions, no, that we need to tackle. No? So questions like, what is life? When does consciousness begin? Is there a limit to human life? Or can we achieve immortality through digital twins? Or should we alter our DNA to prevent disease or even death? Or how far can we modify a human before they become something else? So to answer these questions, or at least attempting to answer them, to this cocktail, no, we need to incorporate humanities, social sciences, and art, and only with this we will be able to solve, no, these ethical and philosophical dilemmas that appear with these technologies, and also to learn more, no, about what it means to be a human, no, about human conditions. So this, and also this, but integrating these fields also open up new questions, no, like this ones, no, how do we as animals interact with other animals in the lab, and how does this affect our research? How are our research practices influenced by our backgrounds, gender, of beliefs, or if we can really transcend disciplinary boundaries? So to answer this question, this is the driving force between an art and science program that we launched 2 years ago. So we are still like learning, no, how to do this. So I'm happy to also to be here and to learn from all the community. So I have to admit that at the beginning, our motivation for our art and science program was more using art as a communication tool, not to reach wider audiences, especially those who normally do not engage with science, but working with the artists and seeing the results, no, now we have extended these goals to, because now what we really want to do is to foster this transdisciplinary collaboration, and with this open new avenues of research, no, and also to foster reflection on human condition and how knowledge is created. So we have been working mainly in 2 types of projects. One of them is the participation in exhibition with other entities. The first one where we participated was in 2022, when we participated in the Ars Electronica in Austria with a collaboration with Antoni Montadas in the Tasmanian Tiger case study of the Museum Exhibition project, where Benedetta Bolognesi, an expert in deep mutagenesis scanning of DNA of IBEC, participated in this piece to study about what it means to be extinct, in the sense that if part of your genes are still in other animals, so maybe the animal is not completely extinct, so it's not truly lost. So more recently, we have participated with the Museu Tàpies here in Barcelona in the exhibition A equals A and B equals B, were curated by Pep Vidal. In this exhibition, we feature a research poster like the one that you can see in a scientific conference, but display in a different context. The piece took a completely different meaning, no? And opening up reflections about the connections between art and science. And also working with Pep Vidal and the people from the museum, we thought it would be interesting also to install these cameras here in the museum, where visitors of the exhibition could see real time what was happening in IBEC labs. No? So in this sense, our scientists became subjects of study, no? Like animal rats. And so it was a kind of closing the loop, no? Between theory, experimentation, reality. So I think this was a very nice experience also for our researchers. But then, as I said, we wanted to go beyond using art as a communication tool and truly foster this transdisciplinary collaboration. And that's why we started our Artist in Residence program. So far, we had 2 experiences. First, we started in 2022 with illustrator Rosa Cousseau and her work on the Laboratory of Human Landscapes. And her work was mainly to confront her artistic research with the way research is done in the lab, no? And so her final work was a diary with her sketches and ideas similar to the laboratory notebooks that our research use. We tried to connect Rosa with our researchers with different activities, like an exhibition in our symposium or a workshop where our scientists follow the same artistic process that Rosa uses. Then our second experience with were German video artist Teresa Maschner. She came to IBEC and she developed a video essay entitled Hela et al., where she studied how reproduction and animals in the lab, they are all connected by technology and how this affect research. And I have to say that this in this second experience, we have succeeded more in linking tests into the lab and with the researchers. And when she presented her video in a event that we organized, and where several researchers with whom she had interacted before, no, they made a reflection about how gender influences how you do research. And I can tell you that the experience was so positive, and the energy in the event was that high. No? And also some of our researchers, they've engaged not to create their own artistic pieces like this fanzine that was done by one of our researchers about her experience as a woman in the lab. And I would like to finish my conclusions about the challenges that we have encountered so far. For the sake of time, I will only read them, and afterwards, if we can discuss about this together. I have highlighted here funding constraints, lack of connection with the art world, misalignment of expectations, difficulties in integrating artists into research groups, and barriers to achieve truly interdisciplinary collaboration. And with this, I'm finishing. If we want to know more about our program, our activities, you can scan this or contact me. And also, I would like to thank Laia Manera, my colleague in IBEC in the Art and Science program, for helping with the presentation and for setting up the program as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Teresa. Among the challenges, you mentioned one that is recurring, so the difficulty in integrating the researchers into the scientific group of people in your institution. May I ask you how you are solving, how are you improving in that way?
Yeah, well, it's not easy, no, because I think that, and I heard this before this morning, also I think we have to see this like a long-term process, no? We need a cultural transformation, because usually what we have found is that researchers often do not see the potential of art in their research and see artists like outsiders, like butterfly hunters that go in the lab like chasing for inspiration, let's say. But I think that with young researchers is more easy. So it is important to work with them. We offer training about art and science to young researchers, and I think what it helps also a lot is to really put the artists inside a research group. No, with Tess Marshner, this was easy because accidentally her partner was a researcher in the lab, so she was very much connected. No, and this has helped a lot. So, but I think this is the way to go to. And also, what I have learned from this morning, the figure of mediators. No, I think it is important to incorporate in the institution these people that can really connect the two worlds, and it is something that we want to explore further.
Thank you, Teresa. And now we are moving to Sofia. She's working on a sign art project at the JRC, and now we will explore another dimension that for the moment we didn't touch deeply, which is the policy aspect. So, Sofia, please, the floor is yours.
Is it this one? Hello, hi, I'm Sofia, and I work for the Postgrowth Innovation Lab, which is a project financed by the European Research Council, really to find out the futures that we might have if innovation was not obsessed and driven by this pursuit of economic growth. And my research over the past 3 years, has been looking at the potentials of sci art projects in that regard. So I'm going to speak for 10 minutes about that and present some research that I did at the JRC, the Joint Research Centre. Primarily, the message that I want to deliver is that there is a pretty fundamental disconnect between the way that we are evaluating these projects in terms of economic value and the kinds of impacts that they are generating, which means that we really need to rethink something called the EU Knowledge Valorization Framework. Gonna work? Yeah. So what is the KVF? The Knowledge Valorization Framework was introduced in 2021 to increase the impact of research and innovation activities. Here, valorization refers to the process of creating social and economic value from knowledge, and impact is understood as tangible value, so things like products, services, solutions, and policies. And this was more recently extended towards the arts as part of this broader integration of the arts into scientific research and innovation spaces, according to really 3 assumptions about what art can do. So the first is that bringing together art and science will help to bridge science with society. The second is that it will generate economic value. And the third is that it will generate social value. So I'm a historian and an archaeologist, and for me this raised quite a lot of deeper questions about how we culturally understand innovation and impact and value. And I wanted to get to the depth of that, really, to understand what art and science were doing together. And so I conducted a 4-month ethnography at a major EU research institution, conducting 32 interviews with artists, scientists, and policymakers involved in these projects with a bottom-up method. So rather than imposing a framework top-down, trying to understand how participants themselves understood innovation, impact, and what they valued about their work. Primarily also to give a space to artists' voices in these discussions, because bizarrely, the way that science talks about art often doesn't actually ask artists themselves what is the impact of their work. So yeah, very much trying to integrate artists into that and to contest this sort of sometimes stereotypical view that emerges within scientific speaking about the artist as someone with tools that are adapted to the completion of science's own tasks, rather than as an individual with motivations and their own values, which may or may not include questioning science. So I'm going to present just one of the collaborations that I looked at. But first, let's look at the research context. So the Joint Research Centre is a multi-site research centre established following the Treaties of Rome, which has produced evidence for policymaking since 1973, primarily in the climate area. And the JRC is made up of epistemologies you would normatively associate to science, so engineers, biologists, chemists, etc. And since 2016, so relatively recently, it's run a SciArt project with a team of 5, and we're lucky enough to have one of them in the room with us, Caterina Benincasa over here, as part of Directorate S. So the aim of this directorate is to incubate and mainstream, eventually, innovative policymaking strategies to improve policy quality, and they do that by engaging citizens as part of the process of knowledge production. So the JRC is therefore quite a crucial case study for us to look at, because artists are uniquely positioned to directly influence policymaking and research. The way that happens is that the JRC have 2-year cycles, each responding to a research and policy directive. They invite applications from external artists through a curatorial statement, and then artists are selected based on portfolio and brought to a summer school, which is a week-long activity of talks, etc., where they will meet scientists and policymakers, and the goal is that you will meet like-minded individuals and a research project will emerge organically based upon mutual interest. So it's very much an idea about an open research structure without already imposing a goal at the end, an experiment, you might say. These projects are then developed during residencies, and the artwork is exhibited in a public institution. So I'm going to show you one of those projects today called Spectrals of Nature, which was a collaboration between 3 researchers, so architect and artist Ingrid Mechel-Hufnagel, surface water specialist Alan Bellwood, and policymaker Elihate Rajaviani. And they came together over their mutual interest in this really fantastic and amazing global surface water dynamics atlas, which is like visually stunning. And they wanted to look at the problem of surface water change over time. So for the scientists and policymakers, this is an issue because surface water change is very much impacted by human-led climate change, but knowledge is not necessarily having impact in the form of policies and behavioral change. Also, obviously, if you're looking at surface water as a changing body over time, these are very much static images. So there's potential here to develop new ways of understanding surface water as not a static body. What's the opposite of static? Moving body over time. And that was achieved by the researchers transferring techniques from architecture, so 3D printing, and combining it with satellite imagery to produce what is essentially 4D objects. So it shows surface water change over time as a 3D sculpture. And this is an example of how one impact of these collaborations is a totally novel way of seeing and understanding surface water by the transfer of techniques and knowledge from one discipline into the other. But crucially, also, these collaborations across the board also resulted in artworks which the scientists perceived as having communicative potential because they were beautiful and engaging, so to bring the society closer to the problem of surface water change. Interestingly, only the artists could really give a formal analysis of exactly why, again, pointing out that their voices are very much crucial to evaluations of the impact of their work. And the collaborations also resulted in these sort of immaterial changes that we were talking about earlier, the defamiliarization of science and truths. This was true of every single testimonial, this idea that basically exposure to difference, different ways of questioning and different ways of seeing the world produced a rethinking of science as much as art. And that involved what you were saying, Teresa, a kind of deeper understanding of the potentials of art beyond communication, as much as thinking, okay, how can I approach my research subject differently, typically through a kind of empathic or emotive perspective. And it was the combination of that relational change and material change that then translated into policy making, as in this example, where the researchers treated water as a body and then brought that perspective into the EU policy lab, where they seated water at the decision-making table to experiment with a more than human politics and policy making. So what would water think about what we're doing here? Basically shifting nature from a secondary object to observe and study to something an equal and participant within decision-making processes, informed by the legal rights of nature, which we heard about earlier in a talk. Were any of the collaborations resulting in economic impact? The short answer is no, not a single one, and they were all actually disavowing that. Primarily, I think, because acknowledging economic incentive within your work perhaps compromises the integrity of perceived scientific and artistic work, but also because economic value was seen to put a limit upon the search of actual meaning and impact. If I summarize these findings, we found that transdisciplinary collaboration resulted in artworks which were accessibly complex because they allowed you to see subjects from many different perspectives in tangible ways. And this also produced relational change amongst researchers, which fostered a rethinking of art and science by the actors involved, and was enabled by freedom from economic incentive. And so if we treat those outcomes as innovation, it means that innovation is not measurable as economic value, not materialized as products, and not market-based. Even if it does respond to global crises, it's aimed at impact in society and is for the benefit of society and environment. So returning to the KVF, what does that mean? Well, we can see that actors did perceive themselves to be generating value from knowledge in ways that brought science closer to society and integrated art. But much of that value was located in processes and immaterial change outside of the market, meaning that if we are looking at economic value as a kind of core facet of SciArt collaborations, we're only looking at the tip of the iceberg if it's there at all. And we really need to pose a different research question, which is how we can embrace these immaterial changes as legitimate forms of value and innovation within EU frameworks. Thank you.
Thank you, Sofia. I think you really touched the point about the need to reflect on economic values differently. We still need to figure out how, but yeah. So the question for you is really this. So how do you think that those immaterial values and elements that you mentioned at the end of your presentation can be transferred to policymakers to allow them to take anyway decision to allocate funds or shape policy?
I mean, I could talk for 10 minutes on this, I think. So I think it's one thing is about storytelling and telling the stories of these collaborations through legitimate voices. So you need to have actually the voices of scientists and policymakers speaking to scientists and policymakers because they are seen to have authority and legitimacy in those spaces. Obviously, then you need the voices of the artists who are able to talk about their work and should be enabled to. But I think the work that the SciArt team does is really crucial there because they find a way to bridge the two in ways that make sense for both sides. We also found that it's so important to be part of these projects to understand the kinds of impacts that they have. Like policymakers who were part of it described a real shift in their thinking between, you know, what they could receive from the artist to perceiving the artist as an expert alongside them. So that entails a complete shift in normal working practice where you create time for policymakers to be part of these types of collaborations. But unfortunately, at the moment, these collaborations are positioned outside of working time, so it's very much like a fun activity rather than intrinsic to their research.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you again, and we are going now to Mona. Mona will present a research framework based on ACTS, so Art, Science, Technology Studies, and the way in which this framework can allow us to reflect critically. So thank you, Mona. The floor is yours.
No, I don't need that. Good afternoon. Thanks, everyone, for having me. I'm just going to jump right into it because the time is short. ASTS as method. This kind of, as for those who have their feet deep into STS, this probably rings a bell because it builds on John Law's contribution in a 2015 book chapter, STS as method. So John Law claims methods ingrained in object processes of study and methods of STS practices are intertwined to underline the fluidity and incoherence of methods and their relationship with the messy world out there. So to kind of tease method as contingent, as performative, and as situated, as we heard this morning from Chris Salter. So this is kind of to think within the socio-technical system, if there are new ways of interacting with the world, they are embedded in amputations to both expand and also mess up our embodied and situated sensing. And what enables this duality to kind of coexist in one framework, if you like, is, I claim, ASTS, Art, Science, and Technology Studies. But what is ASTS? So maybe the term itself came out to be quite prominently known through the 2021 volume edited by Hannah Rogers and her colleagues. But of course, presidents have gone long before that. So ASTS, I claim that is an interdiscipline that abides neither by so-called scientific method, nor mere artistic representations or explorations, but enable a reciprocity, if you like, between artistic and STS methods. So how can they inform one another, as we heard before in the panel as well? So ASTS in this capacity questions technoscientific knowledge production hidden behind academic walls. And another thing it can do is it allows for a public-facing practice-based engagement with technoscience. So this is quite classic. I don't think anyone here hasn't heard of any of this if they are familiar with STS. But what is my contribution and what am I interested in by bringing in ASTS forward? So what I'm interested in, as I call it, my contribution would be to go above and beyond the state of the art, to think ASTS as having a capacity for a critical edge to address urgent sociopolitical concerns. What do these mean? In particular, I just put here for the short time that I have two particular methods that I call exposing and subverting. So exposing is critiquing technoscientific objectivity in its capacity, and subverting is adopting technical pipelines and altering their functionality. I don't think any artist is unfamiliar with these methods of work in general. And what I'm interested in is to enumerate these methods to understand the inner working of critical approaches to ASTS. So what I would like to do is actually to undergo a research project and really try in the field to develop, to study and record other methods such as these. So just as a teaser, I will point to two projects because I don't have much more time to develop. Just as a teaser, I will put an example of each of these. So what would exposing and what would subverting look like? So exposing, this is a project of Trevor Paglen called ImageNet Roulette. I think it's quite a famous project. Probably a lot of people in the room have looked at it. So it was trained on the person category of ImageNet to allow for real-time classification as users stand in front of a camera. So in essence, it sort of really brings forth the absurdity of computer vision and what it could lead to when it's largely deployed on a social level. And then the next project is Winnie Soon's Unreasonable Character series, a project that was showcased in Ars Electronica 23, which uses AI to generate censored social media feed based on the comments that were deleted, basically, by the Chinese government. And it generates these social media feeds through a pipeline that she develops. So it's essentially, and in essence, fundamentally a political project. And then to close down, I would like to, it's also a bit of a provocation, also goes back to the keynote this morning, and also a whole lot of genealogy in STS. This is a quote from Practicing Art Science, Experiments in the Field, edited by Philip Sormani and his colleagues. In the space of art science technology, it is difficult to make things work, but also that any practical agreement over criteria of success remains a precarious, contingent, negotiated achievement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mona. I think here we touched the other relevant keywords of the panel, so not measurements, but values. So for you, if I understand correctly, is that the role of the researcher or the artist to develop intersection project at the intersection of art, science, and tech is the one that the person needs to take people on board, engage the people to give to let them think differently and have a different opportunity to look at the reality. Is it correct?
Yeah, I mean, besides being a researcher, I'm also an educator. And so for me, it's really important to kind of have these folded into one another in a way that I see, for instance, younger students that are doing their MAs or even upper MAs. And this is not something that's unfamiliar to anyone who's practicing in this art science kind of conglomeration, that a lot of times you see this kind of pure obsession with the craft of art science technology, to know how a certain technical pipeline works, to kind of really master a software, if you like, or whatever tool that it is that you're working with. And a lot of times that's quite the end of it. So everything kind of boils down to a brute force formalism and an aesthetic, like and of course we know within this hybrid institution that folds in, capitalist attitudes within institutions and within academia and within, of course, art and culture institutions, that everything is about bigger, better, glossier. And so I really like my students to think about, while I try and practice this myself underground, to think about what can it serve, and can it actually bring awareness towards urgent concerns that are ongoing, rather than just in and of itself being a cute formal practice and attract big institutions and big funding. So, yeah.
Thank you again. And last but not least, we are now moving to the last panelist, Adrien. He's an artist, as said, and now we are going to hear more about a concrete application of the theory, about how he foreseen the artistic practice as a way to look at the reality and explore reality. So please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. This doesn't seem to work, but okay. So this, my project was, it's basically a case study of, I'm an artist who works with color and light, and I wanted to explore color and light in the frame of a non-human perspective. And so since the project was happening in a city, I thought, okay, can we somehow balance between the needs of human beings in the city, the need for light, maybe pleasure, security, whatever, and the potential threat that light causes to animals that live at night in the city. And so it became a case study of around the use of white, so-called white LED light. So since about 20 years, the cities are illuminated by LED light, and LED lights are all kind of the same object. It's a blue LED with some kind of fluorescent powder on it. And it creates a kind of colored light which mixes with the blue light and appears white to us. So, so there are different types of colored LED that are all categorized in so-called phosphor-converted LEDs. So these are like fluorescent plus blue light. You can have like white LED, different color temperatures, cold white, white, warm white, or even so-called PC amber LEDs. So they look like pretty much yellowish like the former technology, but they are all the same kind of technology. It's basically a blue light plus a fluorescent powder. And the colors of these lights appear to us as white or amber, etc., to us, not to other species that have another visual system. It's interesting that even the way that these technologies are like promoted in terms of energy efficiency, for example, the energy efficiency of LED is calculated on the amount of visible light that is created by the device for us, so for human beings. So we use this function, which is called the spectral luminosity function from 1924, to actually give a score to the LED. So it's purely human-centric. And this is true not only for the light sources, but actually for all the colors around us. So the colored materials, the dyes and pigments are selected according to their appearance for us under sunlight or under artificial light that imitates sunlight. All the things you may have learned in art school or primary school about like classification of colors, all of these things are only valid for human beings. So it's a purely kind of, we tend to forget that the color is extremely human-centric. And we also tend to forget that we're surrounded by other colors that we don't see. So for example, like the flowers have dyes and pigments that have been selected by the fact that they are the product of co-evolution between insects and plants. And so things that we don't see because we are not equipped with the proper spectral sensitivity to see them, they actually exist all around us, but they are invisible to us. And so we live in a world where we tend to ignore that there is like an extremely wide diversity of retina, of animal eyes. And we are not aware of this, maybe because we don't really care, but also because we simply don't see it. We don't feel like other species do. And so in my project, I wanted to back up a kind of reflection around light and color on scientific literature. So I started to check, to make a kind of review for myself of like, okay, what kind of properties may animal light sensitivity or animal eyes have that I'm not aware of, maybe. And one important thing is that, like, often, like, some insects have a sensitivity in some area of the light spectrum where we don't see anything, but we also do have some sensitivity where some insects don't have any sensitivity. So it's a little bit like if we are colorblind in respect to each other. And interestingly, the natural light, contrarily to LED light, has energy everywhere. So like, for example, moonlight, we see it maybe white, maybe the insect also sees the kind of neutral light, but for different causes, because the moon has some ultraviolet light that we don't see, but that still stimulates the eye of a nocturnal insect. And for us, it also stimulates all the cones, so all the cells in our eyes, so it appears somehow neutral to both us and an insect. But our LEDs, they are human-centric. They're designed only on the basis of the human sensitivity. And so, for example, LEDs do not emit any UV light, so they do not stimulate a part of the retina of many animals. And so what's the consequence of this? This is what I was like wondering. So intuitively, when you don't stimulate a certain cell in the retina, basically you're creating color blindness. So there's a very famous work by Olafur Eliasson, for example, where only one type of photon is present in a room, and everything looks like black and white. This is because, like, when you reduce the diversity of wavelengths, then you reduce the diversity of color. And so I found in Nature Communication an article that was dealing precisely with that topic. And the results of the article were pretty weird, because it's a study of a hawk moth, a moth that lives at night, that has UV sensitivity. And the article was saying that the color rendition of a light that does not contain any UV was equivalent or better to moonlight, which was like really weird. So I re-implemented the math and the analysis behind the article, and I found that something was completely wrong. So at some point, the math is going completely crazy and creates false colors in the data that do not exist, in fact. And also, like, the article is using human categories, like, for example, color beans, like yellow flowers, which do not make sense in the frame of an animal that does not see yellow, because the cells do not have the same spectral sensitivities as our cells. So let's skip, because I'm already past the time. But basically, what I found the most interesting was that there are many ways to like define light pollution. But then one new way of defining it would be like the fact that it's possible to have like a kind of induced color blindness. So if the spectrum of the light is not adapted to your own visual system, some colors may change or disappear. And well, then the research that I've been conducting within the residency was dealing with this, with the aim of somehow creating an installation that would make us experience a kind of change in color that we are inflicting on the insects without being aware of it.
Thank you, Adrien. So far, with Sofia and Mona, we explored a bit the way in which artistic and scientific project combined can deliver information to policymakers or change the awareness or the conscience of the people about ethical issues. When you run this kind of practices, artistic practice merged with science, what's your final stakeholder? I mean, who is the person you want to reach, and what's the final one?
Well, it's not always clear, but in my opinion, as an artist, I should somehow try to develop a work around some kind of knowledge of the world that surrounds me. So then the precise public I would be addressing my work to would a little bit depends on the context. So if it's a natural history museum, or if it's an art gallery, or if it's a work in the public space, I may take some different level of presentation. But I would say that for me it's important to put in front of the work, like the first priority is to have like a sensible experience, because this is my work, to provide a kind of sensible, direct approach, and to blend this with some kind of knowledge, or like to share some kind of understanding that I have worked to have. So I'm not sure this is the right answer, but
So the way in which you work is kind of create a cultural debate about an issue that you are going to tackle with your artwork?
I leave the debate to the viewer. I'm trying to give elements that maybe are not very clear or very well known already, and to give an experience that makes it obvious that there is something to talk about.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the panelists. Now we have a second round of questions about measures and impact, but first of all, I would like to ask you if there are any questions from the audience, so we can go ahead with your questions. Okay, so maybe we can continue, and then if you have questions, you can always raise your hands, or we will have time at the end of the panel. So, Michele, maybe we can come back to you.
Okay.
Because you mentioned very clearly economic impact in your presentation, even if...
Also social, but we have to distinguish the two things.
Also social. So yeah, without limiting you to economic, so feel free to explore wherever you think makes sense. The question is, according to the fieldwork study that you have conducted, which are the elements, economic, social, wherever, that we need to take into account when we build up a framework to assess the impact of art, science, and technology initiatives?
I think I already started answering this in the sense of, okay, the project has a certain nature, be aligned in terms of nature, and I guess that the other element is also training the project managers in order to steer the project and achieving the objectives of the call or the program. And I know that there are interesting initiatives, training initiatives to form, is Veronica somewhere there that was very important for me in getting this input on is a job, is a profession. You need to be formed for that. Okay, of course you can learn by doing, as in many jobs, but certain level of preparation is necessary. But you know, I think I got many interesting things from. But I start from Adrien. No, Adrien comes with this project. I say, okay, but what is the next big challenge apart from climate change? Is biodiversity loss. And Adrien is talking about the risk that urban light and pollution has an impact on biodiversity loss. I don't know whether he went that far to say, okay, maybe there is a problem there. But you see the relevance of the system, and someone has to listen to these results where artistic output maybe is important, but I see an even bigger challenge here that can be tackled. But this means that each and every art and science project must be part of a larger program in which there are policymakers that are able, policymakers, but also experts that are able to take elements and put them in a bigger scope. But then, I don't know whether this answers. I know that it's very confused, but I'm confused also because I've cites me Sofia that is post-growth. And still we are in the paradigm of growth. Maybe which kind of growth? This is, I think, it's a relevant question, and art and science can help steer growth in the direction that is not only economic. I think this is a question also open.
Yeah, yes.
Can I respond?
Sorry.
No, I am on the same page as you. I think, when we say growth is associated to a whole bunch of things. It's not just the economic growth. It's like the logic that requires in working practice within the institution. And the art and science is really good at getting people to step back and slow down. Like a lot of the results of the collaborations that I followed resulted in changes to research practice and policy, like, for example, asking permission before taking a water sample, or like integrating moments of reflexivity. And these changes in ways of perceiving nature, if allowed to go on over time, would eventually, I would assume, change approaches to policy and contest growth, what we can call growth logics. I think that another thing, if I can continue,
sure.
What I wanted to say is, like, with the policy making, I gave an example of one that translated into policy today, but the great majority of them, at least participants, really emphasize that, okay, I've had all this time thinking differently. How can I apply it when the structures are such? And what the JRC has that's really crucial are these spaces for experimentation where you can behave differently, or like trial novel approaches. And I think that is fundamental.
Yeah, so maybe we should, instead of thinking always to the framework on how to measure, create a different structure where policymakers are more embedded in the process, right? Is it correct, what you are suggesting?
Yeah.
Is this feasible? I mean, in your experience?
I mean, I don't have that much experience, but
at the GRC they collaborated at least.
Yeah, okay. I think it's, creating these spaces for legitimate experimentation. Also, I mean, in so doing, to get away from this Cartesian mindset where you're trying to measure everything. Like, some of these things aren't going to be measurable, and perhaps it's about accepting or creating a legitimate vocabulary for describing them, whereby, like, you're not holding them up to a rubric and saying, does it do this? Okay, therefore it has value. But you are able to identify aspects of those projects that are meaningful, because you can look at things like subverting, or I can't remember the language that you were using, but the kinds of ways that the participants are talking themselves about the project, I think is essential.
And Teresa, looking from the perspective of an institution who is funding somehow an incubator, are you measuring the impact of your project? Do you have a framework? Are you taking track?
Well, measuring impact has become a headache for research centers, but not only in our art and science project, but also in our research. Now everybody is obsessed with impact, which I think is like a very short-term view. For instance, also in basic research, we have like concepts coming from basic research, like the Big Bang, DNA, or evolution, that have changed our way that we see ourselves and the universe. But how can you quantify this? So, but it is true that we rely on taxpayers, and it seems that we need to prove our taxpayers that what we do has an impact in society. And in this sense, I like very much what Sofia was explaining, because this is something that we are planning to do. We are preparing like these surveys for both for our scientists and for our artists, to evaluate how these collaborations have impacted them, to see if they really have changed how they approach research for researchers and also for artists, no? If they had a prejudice or a ideas of how research works, and if this have changed, but this is still work in progress, but maybe next year I can explain this. But it's difficult, and I'm optimistic in the sense that this is not something new, no? So it happened with basic science, it happens with art. Why it is not going to happen with art and science together, no? So that proving impact is tough.
Mm-hmm.
And Adrien, maybe you can reply more or less to the same question, but from your perspective, of course. When do you deliver this kind of artistic project? Do you think about impact or is not? And if yes, what is impact for you as an artist?
Yeah, I think I have a very idealistic and maybe metaphysical objective.
Let us more.
I don't think of impact as something very practical unless it's really important for me in the short term. But I have this. I feel like as an artist I should do something different. So I have to do my best to combine something generous for a public with something sensible and some kind of intellectual content together, packed in a unique way, and this is what my definition of my job somehow. Yeah. Pretty much it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mona,
I can respond to this, even though this is not my forte or my areas of expertise. I can maybe give one example that can illustrate how such projects can have can make a difference, other than just being a public-facing kind of mediator, if you like. So, and that's a project that Impact Center in Utrecht, in Netherlands, have been doing for the past 4 years. It's called Code, and it's around raising awareness about citizens' digital rights, not on a public level, but on a policy-making level. So what they're interested in is to actually invite policymakers, for instance, their local parliamentarian, people from the EU Parliament, to actually look at these projects that are developed under this rubric of digital rights. I was part of one of these projects the past year, and to start a conversation of how can policymakers actually get a good understanding of the barriers and the issues that are out there, and how can they take these understanding back into their workplace and on a table for discussion. And so, for instance, one of their projects, I think, had a good impact in terms of policy. So a local parliamentarian actually took one of these projects seriously and took it on the table. And there were comments, quite a number of comments, when people from the EU Commission, for instance, come and engage in these projects, that they're quite surprised, they're quite shocked by understanding, oh, okay, we know the digital rights kind of like per se as these codes, but we actually never thought that they could play out like this on a social level or on a political level. So by engaging on art on this level, then they get a deeper understanding of how these issues can play out on the ground, on a social level, and then bring that back on the table for discussion.
Thank you for this. This is very relevant. We have a question here. Yes, please. Mic is coming.
Yeah, I would just like to make an observation. When we are talking about collaboration with artists, scientists, engineers, institutions, we are always trying to measure the success of collaboration in a situation that is totally asymmetrical. No, on one side we have an institution, we have a program, we have a framework that it's safe, funded, and so on. And on the other side, we have artists, no, that are coming in proximity to the institution with one project. And we are trying to apply this draconic metrics, you know, of value that is produced in this situation. So my proposal would be, you know, that all these institutions, scientists, engineers, would need to go to artists, to their studios, to be with them, to work at night, at weekends, at festive days, you know, and so on. And maybe they will get, you know, how the ideas are produced and what you can do with the ideas. Because the ideas, you know, you can get it everywhere and there are a lot of them. But how you develop it and how you can work on that in your, let's say, artistic career, how you develop your language, your set of epistemes, semantics, epistemology, and this is what can be understood as something that you can compare, you know, with an institutionalized way of doing things. And what we usually see is an attempt of possible collaborations between the two, which usually don't understand each other at all. Because artists are going somewhere that, and they usually encounter the bias of what art is, which is very often, if not always, in the eyes of the non-artist person, just something we call entertainment. No? Paintings, beautiful music, nice images, something that is comforting, and so on. So we are, when we are creating an opportunity, I would call it a critical infrastructure that sustains this kind of collaboration. Then these meetups with the interested stakeholders can really produce something. And I think that, you know, by being funded through the projects with public money, what we are facing is this constant drama, you know, of producing these encounters, this newness, new artists, new person, new institutions. And we are constantly, you know, like standing in the same position, discovering hot water again and again. No, instead of supporting a hub that will enable, you know, all of them, I would say artists, scientists, engineers, and so on, to work in so-called safe environment and to really dive deep into and get free of their professional backgrounds, of these situated knowledges that are actually narrowing their minds into something that we are surrounded with, which is productivity, values, and so on. You know, this non-use value, it's also economic category, and it's very important. No? But if you have only 5 minutes to defend your work, it's very difficult to defend it because, you know, it's quite a complex thing. So my comment would be, you know, that if we think how to really take something out of different way of seeing things, of understanding things, of creating new epistemologies, we need to create the platforms, not just opportunities.
Thank you very much for your comment. I think it's also a bit applicable to what we were saying with the policymakers. If we always have the policymakers at the end of the chain, like the ones where we have to prove that there was an impact, that the impact was that, and that, we are always the ones to justify the work, and they are always at the end of the chain, maybe also embedding the policymakers.
Can I make
Yes,
a comment?
please.
I mean, I don't understand really what kind of platform are you imagining. To me, it sounds a bit utopic, your proposition, because there are no safe spaces in the world in general. So you want to create an artificial safe space for creators to come together. I mean, as we know, I mean, we discussed it earlier on with Christoph, we discussed it with Chris Salter before, with quite a number of people that are running institutions, that institutions actually don't have a safe or secured budget either. Year to year, they have to struggle and make sure they can secure budgets. Sometimes they don't, and they have to slide. So where does this safety come from? What kind of platform would that be?
So I know it's possible. And who is writing the rules? Are they given by God? No. We have to change it. If we won't change it, we will not change anything. You know, we cannot improve the world we are living with the same approaches we destroyed it. So we have to change the way of funding. We need to change the way of assessing things. And this is what would need to be the message of our gathering today. The things that are working nowadays are not leading us to right directions, you know, and what we are doing in our institutions, it's on the limit of legality, but you know, the limits are fuzzy, so we are exploring it totally. And when we work with artists, we work with long-term agreements, and we are developing their works. And when we go to companies, to institutions, so we demand the rule change, and we establish the rules, which is we are not coming to you to serve you. We are coming to you to help you. So if they don't accept this change of, to change their power game, you know, we cannot collaborate,
So
and
it's
so
an
on and so on.
anti-systemic political project, kind of like a...
This is very practical, bottom up. We just don't accept the power games. And by doing that, we are able to develop really important artworks and really important collaborations with total mind-bending situations, positive utopias and possible scenarios that are really then opening different way of seeing things, which is very important. So the biggest success in our collaboration is not the artwork, but the change of perspective of everybody involved. You know? So in STARS projects, when I was asking the first residency we had, what was their assessment, and they said, oh, look, in this residency we lost a lot of money, but what we gain are my engineers that are thinking differently from this residency on, and they are working differently now, not for the residency. This is what is important, mind bending.
Yeah. Can I ask what how does that's contingent on you accepting that the mind bending is like a good outcome? How did you document that? Do you document that? How do you speak with your engineers? What do they say? Because so much of the stuff in my research was everyone can see that they're thinking differently, but they can't describe how. And they know it's good, but not quite sure. So I'm interested to know.
It's always different with different collaborators. But for example, in that particular case, you know, when we start at the first meeting, when we come to the company, you know, there was the owner, who was actually our peer when we negotiate, and there were the two engineers sitting behind the tables. And at the beginning, you know, they were having this body language, you know, crossed arms, and nothing was possible because they didn't have tools, they didn't have time, they didn't have, it was too expensive, and so on and so on. And because they couldn't imagine what was the artist actually demanding from them. But when we start to translate, you know, how we imagined our collaboration could come to up to something, you know, they start melting slowly, you know, and you don't have a metric for evaluating the change beside what is, you know, their assessment at the end. As you were also, I think, showing some statements, some quotes, and this is what you come at the end.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's about the testimonials, like hearing people tell the stories. I think you raise another issue that we haven't really talked too much about, which is the trust aspect, and that requires time. And evaluation over time as well is something that we haven't really talked about. That, you know, okay, you've got the artwork and the thinking differently, but then that's where the process ends, currently at least. So how do you kind of think about all the possible ways that that will have impact over time? It's absurd almost that someone could go and see something in an exhibition and then 20 years later like come up with something else. Like, I think that's one of the difficulties with the evaluation as well.
I really thank you, all of you. I think we got a lot of interesting knowledge that we will keep us reflecting soon. And thank you, all of you, for listening us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.